My friends, welcome. In part 1 of this video, we discussed the fact that genetically engineered microbes have already been deployed to tens of millions of acres of US farmland. It's a program that's going around the world right now. That there's no way to get these things back in the bottle or even to kill them off. They are destroying and replacing the natural microbiome of the soil and very likely contaminating the gut microbiome of anyone that eats crops from these plots. So we talked about horizontal gene transfer and all that in the first video. It's linked below. However, we need to deepen our analysis because the end goal of the technocrats who are funding these genetically modified monstrosities is not just to fix nitrogen. As you might imagine, Bill Gates and the World Economic Forum and all the other major depopulation-oriented players who are funding this research could care less about plant health. No, they're looking actually to construct a global biosurveillance system. That's kind of a mouthful, so let's talk about it. I'm Christian, and this is the DoD's Tellus project, which was a few years ago launched to, this is their public-facing website, and they are unambiguous in their description about looking for microbe-based sense and responding devices for DoD-relevant environments. Microbe-based sense and responding devices is a spy microbe, right? That is a biosurveillance device. Specifically, continuing, DARPA seeks to establish the range of chemical and physical signals that microbes can detect. What can they see? The environmental conditions they can tolerate. Where can we put them? And the types of output that can be generated. How can they talk back to us, right? How can we feed this into our AI? Now, DoD relevant environments, of course, is everywhere, right? We can infer that from the name Total Information Awareness that this whole project started way back in the day. Now, how is the Department of Defense going to achieve this? Well, there's a couple contracts and companies and funding relationships that are pretty illustrative of the way this is being implemented. And I guess before we even dig in, one thing that I think is important to call out in this video is that what looks like the free market innovating and investors trying to find profits for their, there's a veneer of legitimacy that is slapped on top of what is in actuality a DoD project that has been spun off into Palantir, and then that's metastasizing now into Ginkgo bioworks with the CTO of Palantir coming over as the chairman of the board, and these grants that have been written to Mammoth. These aren't companies, right? Palantir's not a company. These are departments in this technocratic superstructure that's being deployed. And that becomes evident when you look at the products and the partnerships that these companies are putting out, that this is actually it's basically a software architecture design. And these companies are developing different layers of that architecture. So briefly, we'll look at a couple of these. A lot of this went into hyperdrive during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's when some of these plans, one comment I got on my last video was, we've been talking about biotech, nanotech, surveillance forever. You're behind the times. We have been talking about it for a long time. There are people, though, that are just arriving at these conversations, and so it's important that we keep talking about it so that people can catch up. And what's newsworthy now, I think, is that this is being executed on now. It's no longer just white papers and what if we had a microbe that no, these things have been developed and they're being deployed now, and we'll talk in a moment about the legal protections, the liability shielding that's going into law in order to provide cover for this new biotech, biosurveillance system, biodigital convergence, all the things we've been hearing, but it's now, guys. That's what really we need to draw attention to. So ARPA-H, like I said, went into hyperdrive with their grants and their contracts during COVID-19. One of the companies I think is relevant and worth exploring here is a company called Mammoth Biosciences. They have been charged by, in fact, here's the contract from USAspending.gov that says that the Department of Health and Human Services, that HHS gave them $20+ million in order to develop SARS-CoV-2 detection platform in microbes. So this tells you that Mammoth has been selected as the sensing devices. And there's a couple other players, actually Metabiota among them, which I don't even want to touch in this video. There are a couple players that have been promoted and funded such that they will produce the sensing devices that we just heard described from the Department of Defense Tellus program, right? We want sensing microbes. These are the companies that are producing them. And so Mammoth is a World Economic Forum partner, called out for pandemic detection, and their systems are already being used now in wastewater systems around the US and internationally. It's also worth mentioning that Mammoth's angel funding, in other words, their first initial seed round of capital that they got in order to start their company, came from none other than Tim Cook, the Apple CEO. It's extremely incestuous, and it all points to what I was just saying, that this isn't the free market operating for our benefit anymore. This is a network of interlinked departments in a technocratic superstructure. The next company I want to talk about, and we mentioned them in part 1 of this video, is Ginkgo Bioworks. They also got funding during COVID-19 to take their stuff into hyperdrive, and the specific part that's been latched onto by DARPA, or now ARPA-H, was these deployable laboratories that you can put, they're like in a container, and you can deploy them wherever you need them as a response form to rapidly manufacture microbes, like the sensing microbes that Mammoth is creating. So like I said, when you put together this architecture, you can see how these things all fit together, how this is one integrated agenda that's being executed under the guise of little companies doing their own thing. So here we see that they just in April of this year, Ginkgo was given a new contract from ARPA-H to develop distributed manufacturing of, and the specific thing they're manufacturing is APIs, the pharmaceutical ingredients, under the pretense that America should be more independent and not depend on China for all of their imports, which sounds great. I mean, it's true, right? That is true. No country should depend on another country to make all of their drugs. But to do it using deployable microbe infrastructure is where you have to say, wait a minute, does this purpose actually align with what they're doing? And it doesn't. So when you combine Mammoth and Ginkgo, and then also consider that Ginkgo there's sort of a bit of a takeover. I talk about this in depth in the written form, the posted version of this report, which you can find on unshadowed.org. But suffice to say here that the CTO of Palantir has come over to take over as chairman of the board of Ginkgo. So Ginkgo Bioworks is now the synthetic biology arm of Palantir. But they don't want to just buy them because that would be too obvious, so they send out their CTO. At any rate, Ginkgo is very explicit they're very open about the fact that they're developing a global bioradar system. In other words, it's a planetary scale biosurveillance system. This isn't rhetoric from me, folks. I'm not trying to make a video that gets people excited. Like I said, this is old news, right? People have been talking about biotech, nanotech forever. So if that was the goal, I would try and find something scarier. That's not my goal. My goal, like I said, is to keep this conversation going because it's happening now, and I'm still surrounded by people that aren't even aware of it. So Ginkgo talks about how they're deploying these hubs, and like I said, they have deployable units that can be used to manufacture any kind of microbes anywhere in the world. One final point, and that is that this whole apparatus we're describing is being positioned as critical infrastructure. In other words, the whole thing, from the AI data centers to the microbes that we're deploying in the soil and then in your mouth and on your skin and in your gut, all of it, in the wastewater, all of this is now just as important for national security purposes as the power grid or as the phone network. We're going to keep it running at all times. We will take your water and your power if needed to keep the data centers running. That's what they mean with critical infrastructure. And the way that manifests in a few different ways that we can see, not just their language, which is already openly saying that, right? Trump stood there on day 2 of his presidency announcing $500 billion for AI infrastructure. Standing there with Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, who coincidentally was also one of the first major sources of funding for Ginkgo Bioworks. I'm telling you, it's the most incestuous. Like, if you just look behind the corporate logos, it's very clear this is one integrated operation. little teams or departments of the same organization. At any rate, also in the UK, when they announced just a couple days ago, what did the CEO of NVIDIA say? The only thing missing here is the AI infrastructure. There's a reason they're calling it infrastructure, because it is already considered critical infrastructure. You can see that also in the fact that they are now putting into place liability shielding for the manufacturers of these synthetic microbes. Legislation is being advanced in 11 states right now, and it's already passed in 4 that provides liability protection. Just like the liability shielding for vaccine manufacturers, here what's happening is that the biotech and the big ag companies that are creating these synthetic microbes are getting protections written into the law that says they can't be held liable for any problems with these things. None other than Bayer helped draft the section of the federal farm bill last year that was aimed at limiting pesticide liability. How did they do that? Well, Bayer formed what they call the Modern Ag Alliance, quote, a diverse coalition founded by Bayer that is that is pushing these new technology innovations for agriculture. In other words, synthetic biology. So the same companies that are and Bayer has also a partnership with Ginkgo that I mentioned how ridiculously incestuous this whole thing is. So the same companies that are creating GMO microbes and are deploying it into the fields are also starting up ag alliances and drafting the new laws that say they can't be sued for their monstrous creations. Why is that? It's because this has to go into place. This is being deployed now. This is part of the new AI critical infrastructure that's going to keep an eye on every inch of soil and on everyone's microbiome and everything that's going through the wastewater. They need, what do they need? Total information awareness. That has been the name of the game and the project from day one. So, when we see all of this happening, and when Palantir is out there saying they're looking for ways, as they partner with the Defense Department of the UK, where is this, to transform lethality and improve the kill chain. I've mentioned that in yesterday's video. It's pretty clear that Palantir is in charge of a battlefield system, and that these microbes, that's why DoD said we want microbes that are going to report in DoD environments. They're turning the entire planet into a battlefield. They want total surveillance over everything. This is not me saying it. This is their own words that we've just together looked at, put together into a real picture of what's actually going on right now.
Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. And it's unimpeachable.
Spread this video to other people that should be aware of it, or make your own video. I'd be happy to share it. Whatever it takes, guys. It needs to be a conversation that we're having right now. So thanks for watching. You can find this report and all my reports over on unshadowed.org. And if you value this broadcast and if you appreciate this data, then please subscribe there and help me keep it running. You can also find me on patreon.com/iceagefarmer. Thanks again for watching.